Shalom, shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This right here, basically getting into the fact that the Hebrew we speak is not Yiddish. This presentation, brothers and sisters, is done because there are those who are saying that words such as Shalom, such as Yisrael, such as Yerushalem, and even the writing that you see right here is Yiddish. But we want to present with reasoning the distinction between Hebrew, be it ancient or modern, and the thing that's called Yiddish. All right, so this is something, brothers and sisters, we really want to show for edification purposes. Now, let's look, brothers and sisters, with the arrow here. If Aleph, Bet, Gemel, Dalet, Hey, Waw, Zayin, Chet, Tet. Yod, Kaf, Kaf, Sofit, Lamed, Mem, Mem, Sofit. Nun, Nu, Sofit, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Pei, Sofit, Zadeh, Zadeh, Sofit, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Tau. Now, I want to emphasize, as I've done in other lessons, that ancient Hebrew, the Hebrew that you see within the Old Testament, only had 22 letters. So let's go over, brothers and sisters, what those 22 letters were in ancient Hebrew. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, skip, 12, 13, skip, 14, skip, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Now, for those who are following along, you will notice that I skipped the letters that's called the final letters or the Sophite letters, because in ancient Hebrew, they did not exist. All right. So this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. All right. Now, they have a thing, brothers and sisters. When I say they, I'm talking about they who promote the Hebrew that you see today. Have a thing called numerical value of Hebrew. Now, inside the numerical value of Hebrew, Tau represents the number 400. And so it goes Aleph as 1 all the way to Yod as 10. Then Kaf begins 20, Lamed 30, Mem 40, Nun 50, Samek 60, Ayin 70, Pei 80, Zadeh 90, Kuf 100, Resh 200, Shin 300, Tau 400. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, brothers and sisters, that is what is referred to as post-biblical Hebrew. All right. So that's what I want to point out in that particular regard. Now, if you go in your own time and you read, as we're going to point out in here, in Psalms 119, you will begin to see that ancient Hebrew, or the Hebrew of the Old Testament, had 22 letters. All right. Hebrew had 22 letters in its alphabet. All right. So let's look at this. When you see B and V, that V is an add-on. When you see V, O, or U, that's an add-on. This letter right here is properly called wow, and it makes a W sound. All right. So when you see K or KH, that's kaf. That simply just represents the sound of the letter K, not the letter C. All right, but the letter K. Now, as we explained, there were no final sophites in ancient Hebrew, so we skipped that part there. You have lamed, the L sound. All right. Mem, the M sound. Nun, the N sound. Samek, the S sound. Now, I want to emphasize something that we're looking at right here, right? You see this right here, the Samek and the Mem Sophite. The only distinction in block form is that the Samek has an indentation here on the bottom of it, all right, on the right-hand side of such, right? Now, look at the sound that Samek is said to make is S. And so now we see here Shin, which is said to make the SH or the S. Then we have Tau said to make the T or the S. Brothers and sisters, this S that you see there with the Tau, all right, is an add-on as well. This S, I'm going to go there, brothers and sisters, that you see with the Shin is also an add-on, because this letter basically made the sh sound. And this is why when you get into deep studies of Hebrew, you will begin to see where they interchange the Samech letter, all right, that we see here, and the Sin letter, all right? And so this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. 80% of what is said to begin with a Sin can also be spelled correctly with a Samech. Now, the reason why you would have what is referred to as Sheen and Sin is the same reason why you would have Bet and Vet, because certain people cannot pronunciate certain things certain ways. So they already knowing, brothers and sisters, that the word, for instance, Shibolet in the book of Judges is correctly spelled with this letter, Sheen, all right? But you had some that said Sibolet. Now, Sibolet in the book of Judges, chapter 12, is spelled in the Hebrew there with the letter Samek, all right? But if they were to, let's say back in the days of Judges, if they wanted to sit there and have this Shibolet as Sibolet, they would have to sit there and add on another letter, as they've done with the Seen aspect. So this is why I just wanted to point this out for edification purposes. Now, another thing to point out, as many have done already, is when you see ayin here as silent, then you see aleph here as silent. One of the things we want to point out, brothers and sisters, is that ayin is said by many as a guttural. And this is why when you have what is referred to as a lamed ayin verb, a lamed ayin verb is any verb that ends with the letter ayin, such as the word shama. All right, that ends with the letter ayin. So in the present tense, you say show me ah, show me ah. Whereas had it just been a regular mute letter like the aleph, any verb that ends with the letter aleph is called a lamed aleph verb, such as the word rapa. The word rapa means to heal. All right, like you're healing somebody as a medicine aspect. All right, so this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. Next slide. Hebrew presentation. All right, same lettering. All right, just had the Sophie aspect in that particular regard. Next slide. Hebrew presentation. Now, this is what many would look at and then say, wow, this is ancient. And it is an ancient form of writing. Note the wording that a brother is using. An ancient form, A-N, which means that there was more than one ancient form of writing when they wrote in ancient days. You understand? Just as much you have calligraphy in English, you have block English, you have standard English, you got script English. There's nothing new really under the sun. All right. So this is something I want to point out in that particular regard. Now let's look at even the transliterations of such and pronunciation, should I say. Alep, Bet, Gemel, Dalet, Hey, Wow, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod, Kap, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Zade, Quope, Resh, Shin, Tau. Notice, brothers and sisters, T-A-W. And it's said here to make the T sound. Then when we see this right here, Tau, with the T or the S sound. But that means you got three different types of S's, one here, and one here. Whereas in the ancient days, there was only one S sound. All right, so this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. Okay, so now when you look at this, this would have been more so what Jeremiah the prophet would have been used to seeing. All right, as far as it goes with written form of such. All right, so let's go on, brothers and sisters, into the next particular aspect. Phoenician aspect. Now, this becomes very, very important because we're going to get into later on the actual discussion concerning what they refer to as pictograph Hebrew. Now, let's look at this right here. All right, remembering that Hebrew, as we're going to go over, is read from right to left. You got Aleph, ox, Bet, house, Gamel, camel. Now, let's look at this first three, for instance, brothers and sisters, right? Aleph said to mean ox. You see that, brothers and sisters, when you go into Hebrew in the book of Jeremiah. All right. Now, Bet means house. Now, brothers and sisters, Gamel, camel. Dalit, door. Hey, window, wow, hook. You see that wow translated as hook when you go, brothers and sisters, into the book, all right, of Exodus, chapter 40, when you read about the hooks and so forth, about the tabernacle. Now, you may want to subscribe if you care to the channel Moreh Yeshaya Torah Lessons, because in it I expounded upon the book of Exodus in many cases in Hebrew and in English, and showed pictures and so forth about how the tabernacle was and so forth, right? Now, let's look at this right here, brothers and sisters. You see this right here when it says wow, meaning hook? There was a person of prestige in the book of Numbers transliterated as Vaspi, whereas in the Hebrew, we will say as Waspi or Wasi. All right? Why am I saying that? It's because when you go with brothers and sisters into the book of Numbers, chapter 13, you read about that particular aspect. And it begins in Hebrew, all right, with this letter that you see right here, written in modernized form Hebrew with this letter here. Now, why am I emphasizing that? Because there are Israelites who say that this letter here absolutely makes no kind of sound of its own. And so you only see an U or an O aspect. Many hop on the U aspect. Now, if that were the case, then how would you say the word hook in Hebrew? If this letter wow had no sound of its own and was only used as an U holder for vowel purposes or so forth, how would you say the word hook in Hebrew, knowing that you see it in Exodus chapter 40? Now, continuing on, brothers and sisters, in this particular aspect, all right, you have tet, good, yod, hand, kop, or kaf, palm. Kaf means spoon. You see that in the book of Jeremiah. And kaf also means palm. All right. Lamed, gold, G-O-A-D. Mayim, mem, water. Noon, serpent. Samek, fish. Many also say that the word samek also means to support. All right. Ayin, eye. This is the kind of eye that you see with. Peh, mouth. Zadeh, papyrus. Some people say zadeh also means, brothers and sisters, fish hook. All right. Quoth. All right. Eye of needle. Some people also say that quoth also means monkey or the back of one's head. Then you got resh, which means head. The word resh from the word rosh as well means head or leader. Then you got shin, which is tooth, and tau, which is mark or sign. S-I-N-G. So this is something we want to point out. Now, why am I emphasizing when I say Phoenician aspect? Phoenician, the word itself, the word Phoenician comes from the Greek word itself, and it means purple. Now, this is why we want to get into etymology and so forth and so on. The Phoenician people were a different conglomerate or groups of Israelites from the tribe of Dan and Asher, as well as Canaanites from Canaan's firstborn son, Zidon. Now, the capital city where Phoenicia was called Tyre. Now, when you go in your own time to Ezekiel chapter 27, you read about the aspect of the people of Tyrus or Tyre. All right. And you read about Dan and Judah in there, and they traded certain things as we're going to get into in this particular presentation. One of the things that mentions in Ezekiel chapter 27 is purple. Now, they traded purple. Now, when the Greeks later on came and seen these people later on during the era of Herodotus and so forth and so on, they referred to them as the Phoenician or the Poenai inside of the Greek aspect. All right, which means in Greek language purple. That doesn't mean that the people were colored purple. It just means that they called them based upon the trade that was done. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide. Hebrew by different names. According to Davies Mitchell, Students Hebrew Lexicon, we are able to see that there were different Hebrew styles. Now, when I say different Hebrew styles, we're talking about the aspect of different Hebrew writing styles. Following is a list of some and how they looked. Next slide. Old Hebrew coins and gems. Now, what you're looking at right here dates to the era of the Maccabees. All right, so you see Yod, Sin, Resh, Aleph. Now, in many types of coinage stuff, they may sit there and have a letter that's not fully there or dropped off, but we know that that is supposed to sit there and represent Yisrael. Okay, so now, Yerushalem, Yerushalam, Jerusalem, Israel, Jerusalem. These coins date back, brothers and sisters, to the era of the Maccabees. Now, let's look at this right here. Inscription, Paleo-Hebrew. I want to explain about that in a second. Yohanatan, the high priest in the council of the Jews. Now, when you look at this, this is a baby replica of the menorah, all right, dated, according to this, with John Hyrcanus, even though it says undated, to the aspect of the 2nd century BCE. All right, now, all of this is inscriptions. This will be the Hebrew version of what they refer to in Egyptian stuff as a scarab, where people just take a rock or stone or so and etch into it. All right, so this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide. Hebrew, Samaritan, and Dibon. Now, what you're looking at right here on the left-hand side is the Samaritan aspect of how they wrote Hebrew. Now, we already know to a great extent the Samaritans originally were not the true house of Israel. So what does that tell us? That there were other people besides indigenous Israelites or original Israelites, all right, that were speaking Hebrew, all right, and writing in Hebrew. So that's something we want to point out. That also shows, brothers and sisters, that just because a person speaks Hebrew, speaks of Hebrew, it's not necessarily a Hebrew. Because the Samaritans and the original Samaritans, should I say, were not Israelites. The original Samaritans were the people that the Babylonians, all right, and the Assyrians, that is more so the Assyrians in a corporation with Babylon, all right, put inside of the land of Israel in Samaria, all right, after the northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians, all right, in the 8th century BCE. So this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. All right, now, when you look at this right here, you still see Aleph, Bet, Geman, Dalat, Ay, Ba, Zen, and it goes on and on and on and on. So this is their form of writing what the other peoples wrote as this here. All right. So this is something we keep on wanting to emphasize in that particular regard. Now, this right here, you still see the Bet, Samek, Aleph, Resh, Noon, and so forth and so on. Like you see right here, the Wow, you see right here, a Mem, you see right here, a Resh, and so forth and so on. Dibon was the king of the Moabites. So, brothers and sisters, this is something we want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes in that particular regard. The Dibon aspect dates all the way back to when the northern tribes of Israel, all right, had conflict and issues with the people of Moab. All right. So I want to take, brothers and sisters, a little bit of time and read something concerning this particular aspect, if we will. All right. What I'm reading, brothers and sisters, is going to be coming from a book called Extra Biblical Sources for Hebrew and Jewish History. All right, by Mercer. You can get this book online, actually. Now, in this particular book, here's what we read in for edification purposes. All right, it says the following: I am Misha, king. It says, I am Misha, son of Moab. Pardon me. I am Misha, son Chemosh, king of Moab, the Dibonite. My father was king over Moab 30 years, and I became king after my father. And I made this high place for Chemosh in Korah, a high place of salvation in brackets, because he saved me from the kings and because he caused me to see my desire upon all them that hated me. Omri, king of Israel, he afflicted Moab many days because Chemosh was angry with his land, and his son succeeded him. And he also said, I will oppress Moab In my days, he said thus, but I saw my desire upon him and upon his house, and Israel perished utterly forever. Now Omri took possession of the land of Medeba, and Israel dwelt in it. His days and half his son's days, 40 years, but Chemosh restored it in my days. And the men of Gad occupied the land of Ataroth from of old, and the king of Israel built Ataroth for himself. And I fought against the city and took it, and put to death all the people from the city. Brothers and sisters, I just wanted to read that particular part because it talks about Misha, king of Moab, and that he is a Dibonite. Dibon, as stated, all right, is like the capital where the kingdom was of the people of Moab. You read about Misha in the Bible in the book of 2 Kings chapter 3. What you're looking at right there, brothers and sisters, is part of what they call the Misha stele, the bone writing, all right? And when he talks about the Israelites, and when you read about the men of Gad, and so forth and so on. So it's not too hard to figure out exactly what it's talking about. It actually mentions Omri by name. Omri is one of the kings that you see of inside the scriptures when you go to 1 Kings chapter 16. So these are things we're pointing out. Next slide. Aspects of different Hebrew writing. Now, they are saying this, that in different aspects of history, Hebrew took a different form of writing as we begin to see as it goes on down. So one is called Ahiram, one is called Yehimilk, one is called Samaria, we ran over that, one is called Gezer. Gezer, look that up and you'll find what they refer to as the Gezer calendar that goes back to the era dated to Solomon. All right? Kilamua, that goes back, brothers and sisters, to the 9th century BCE, all right, in which they actually had a stele that one of the kings spoke about what he was doing to other kingdoms of the world, all right? Then you have Shema, that goes back to the era of Jeroboam, whether it's Jeroboam the first or Jeroboam the second, is certainly a Jeroboam of the northern kingdom. Then you have Siloam, the Siloam also known as Shiloah. You read about that in the book of Isaiah chapter 7. Isaiah chapter 7 is also during the time of King Ahaz of the tribe of Judah. Next slide. The Lachish matter. In the past, we went over the pictures of the Lachish matter in the Hebrew that is on that. In this presentation, we will show a comparison for edification purposes. Now, let's look at this right here. You got the men of Judah, because Lachish was a place in the city of, in the land of Judah, a city in the land of Judah. And the Assyrians that was taking over them, as we've shown this picture again and again, and so forth and so on. All right, next slide. Gamariah in Hebrew. From Lachish. Now, I want to point this out because this is what they will say is ancient Hebrew writing. You have the Gamel, the Mem, the Resh, the Yod, the He, the Wow. Gamariah. The word Gamar, all right, means to finish or complete. Wayered Beit HaMelech al Lishkat HaSofer, Wehine Sham Kal HaSarim, Yoshbin, Elishama HaSofer, Ud Layahu ben Shemayahu, El Natan ben Akbor, Ugmar Yahu ben Shaphan, Wazid Kweyahu ben Kanan Yahu, Wakal Hasarim. You see the highlighted part? Gamar Yahu, Gamel Mem Resh Yod He Wow. Gamel Mem Resh Yod He Wow. Gamar Yahu, which essentially in Hebrew means the Most High has completed. See, these are things we're pointing out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. Now, in the opening of this, I stated we're going to show things that predate Herod. Now, those who are into the conscious community, quote unquote, those who are into the debate realm, know why I'm saying the era before Herod, because trying to muzzle out, brothers and sisters, the evidence of the house of Israel in archaeology and in history and in sociology and so forth and so on. We have been asked, can you show any evidence of any Hebrew writing before the era of Herod? There you go right there. From the era of Lachish. That dates back to the era of the prophet Jeremiah. That's before the era of Herod. See, what happens a lot of times is when one studies for himself or herself, like it says in Proverbs chapter 9, says if you wise for yourself. You have those who don't take the time to study for themselves and they just watch a video and ask somebody a question based upon a video. The person asks a question in the video, the person listens to the video and then asks the same question without trying to see if there's an answer to it. That's what you call regurgitation unnecessarily. Next slide. Hebrew vowels. Now, the names of these are referred to as a kamat, patak, zere, sego, shawa, kolam, chirik, kobut, shuruk. All of these things that you see kataf, all right, the word kataf essentially means part or side of, all right? So now, looking at it, brothers and sisters, in that particular regard, so they're saying that this is the kataf kamats. So you're saying it as but just shorter, just shorter, just shorter. But you're still saying and regardless. They're saying that when you have one of these with a shawas looking sound next to it, it means that you're saying it real fast, like eh. That second S sound has, brothers and sisters, this right here. Eh means I will do. So they're saying it's not it's eh. But ese doesn't change the meaning of the word because there's no Hebrew word difference between ese and ese. All right, so this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. Now we're going to emphasize the aspect of vowels extensively as this video goes on. All right, kamats, the a sound, petak, the a sound, zere, the a sound, segol, the sound, as in the word pen. Shawa, we expounded upon this in Hebrew lesson number 6 on this particular channel, how the shawa works. Look, they join it on to the sound before it, or if it's just by itself, and the first letter, you just make the sound of the letter itself. Then you have kolam, which stands next to whatever the letter is. So if there's been a bet, it would have been bo. Had this been a resh, it would have been the word ro. Had this been a kuf, it would have been the word quo. So this is just what we want to point out in that particular regard. All right. Then you have the kirik, which sits by itself underneath the letter with or without a yo next to it, as in Yisrael. All right. As in Malchi. All right. Malchi has that E sound at the end. Malchi means my king. So you hear brothers and periodically talk about Melchizedek. Melchizedek in Hebrew simply means king of righteousness, or my king is righteous, or righteousness of my king. That's what Melchizedek means. It's not a deep secret aspect, because it says the order of Melchizedek in Psalms 110. The order of it doesn't mean that it's a deep mystery or secret. Next slide. Psalms 119. In Psalms 119, all Hebrew letters to the alphabet are shown. There are actually 22 Hebrew letters. The current use of what is referred to as Sophite letters did not exist in the Hebrew of old. The other aspect is that the vet, sin, fe, and chaf also did not exist in Old Hebrew. Remember, as you read in Psalms 119, all the Hebrew letters are there. All right, there is no distinction between sheen and seen in there. So therefore, when they had a quote unquote invention of the letter seen, brothers and sisters, is about little, maybe over 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, or something of that sort. But that's only was because of people who wasn't able to pronunciate it correctly. That's what happened. So here's the point, brothers and sisters. If you have to add letters in to already ancient alphabet, right? Now, we're not talking about different accents. We're talking about adding a whole aspect of 8 letters that did not exist in ancient Hebrew. The 5 sophites, the vet, the sin, and the kaf. There was a kaf, but they made an actual aspect of kaf and then kof as if it's stronger. Brothers and sisters, the European Jews are not the real Hebrews. Could this be perhaps why they couldn't say Abib? So they have to say Aviv. You can't say Abiba. You don't have the lips to can't do that. So you have to say Aviva. Because you can't say Abiba. Next slide. Hebrew reasoning. As discussed in the past, Hebrew is listed as part of the Afro-Asiatic languages. Next, we will get into some Hebrew rules and regulations. Grammar does exist. Hebrew rules and regulations. Hebrew is read from right to left. Check. The letters also hold numerical values. Check. The letters which are silent remain silent, unlike English. Check. The understanding, too, that Hebrew is the language of gender is actually true. Check. Next slide. Feminine letters in Hebrew. We see here on the left-hand side the letter Hey. All right. The letter Hey gives forth the H sound. All right. And then next to it, we see the letter Tau, as we went over before. All right. So these are the two feminine letters in Hebrew. The letter Hey, which is the fifth letter, and the letter Tau. Now, I want to emphasize on something, and it's not to sound a brother is being a wuss once it comes down to a woman. No, it's not like that at all. All right. In order, brothers and sisters, to formulate the causative of stuff, the letter Hey is used as a prefix. The stem that is generally understood to cause things to be is the Hefil stem. Hefil begins with the letter Hey. And when you have it conjugated inside of its past tense, you see the letter Hey there. All right. So what am I saying? That you can't have nothing in Hebrew that's being caused to be in existence without the feminine principle. Next slide. In Hebrew, there is a set of verbs. A verb is an action word. There are 7 stems to this system. The qual, which is the simple, active. The nif'al, which is the passive of the qual. PL, pu'al. The PL is the intensification of the qual. Pu'al, all right, as we went over also on this channel, is the passive of the PL. The Hefil is generally serving as the causative. The Hof'al, okay, is the passive of the Hefil. And the Hipa'el, all right, stands on its own volition once it comes down to that. Next slide. Torah and TORAHTI. Deuteronomy chapter 32. Wayomer aleihem. Simu lababkem. Lokohad barim asha anoki. Mi id bakem hayom. Ashel tit zawon. Et banekem. Lishmor la asot. Et ko dibre ha-Torah hazot. Now you see the part that's highlighted there in the yellow? That says ha-Torah. You drop the hey off, you get the word Torah. But a situation had to be done regarding Numbers chapter 32. So we see ha-Torah. Now let's look at Jeremiah 16. Wa amarta aleihem al asher azbu abotekem oti ne'um yodewahe wa yelku akare Elohim akerim wa ya abdun wa yishtakavu lahem wa oti azabu wa et torati lo shamaru. All right. And you shall say unto them concerning which they have forsaken me, their fathers have forsaken oti me, saith the Most High, and they have went after other gods. See this part right here? Wayelku akare Elohim akerim. This disqualifies the Jewish man. We've always served Hashem and we've always kept the laws of the Torah. Then you're not the people that he's talking about right here in Jeremiah 16. And those were the Israelites. See, Jewish man, the Torah and the Tanakh stands against your claims. I once discussed this with a Jewish guy online, and I guess not trying to be funny or disrespectful, he must have thought, not to be haughty, that I was one of them who didn't promote Hebrew hard or those who spoke Hebrew without vowels and so forth and so on. But not to be haughty, when he realized that brother does study something, then yeah. All right. Now, what is I pointing out right here? TORAHTI, my law. HaTorah, the law. See the letter Hey here, right? See the letter Hey here, right? See the letter Hey, pardon me. See the letter Tau here? See the letter Tau here. Remember I said those are the two feminine letters, Hey and Tau? Well, there you go. When you show the possession of a feminine noun, the Hey becomes a Tau sounding. Next slide. Rules and regulations, part 3. In regards to verbs, the past tense is noted as showing the suffix at the end of the word. Example, Shama means to hear. Shamati means I heard. In regards to verbs, the future tense is noted as showing the prefix in the beginning of the word. Example, Shama means to hear. Tishma means you will hear. Next slide. Rules and regulations, part 4. Shamata. Here we see the word shamata. The word means you heard. This is noted in the past tense. Here we see the word tishma, meaning you will hear. So this right here in the blue shows it to be the future tense. This right here as a suffix in the past tense is how this is noted. Prefix future tense, suffix past tense. All right, next slide. Let's go in. With the clap of the hands, we see Hebrew verse Yiddish. Hachama, the Hebrew word meaning sun. And here we see in the blue, Dizun, Yiddish word meaning sun, S-U-N. Now, Ha means the, Chama, sun. You see that in the book of Isaiah, okay? Cham means warm or hot. So Chama is translated emphatically as sun, S-U-N, because from it comes heat and warmth. So this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. What this is here, I don't know, even though it's written in Hebrew letters. Next slide. Hebrew verse Yiddish. All right. Aim, Hebrew word for mother. Mut-ar, Yiddish for mother. Mut-ar. Still written in the same character, but one is no offense intended. Making up stuff, it seems. Mut-ar and aim. Now you see aim written as mother when you go to Ezekiel, all right, chapter 23. Next slide. Hebrew verse Yiddish. Aretz, earth in Hebrew. Then we see on the right-hand side, Erd, Yiddish for earth. See the difference between Hebrew and Yiddish? Next slide. Hebrew verse Yiddish. Elohim, Hebrew for God. I'm not even going to read what's on the other side, because those who speak in Yiddish don't say Elohim, meaning God. All right? Next slide. Hebrew verse Yiddish. Should be obvious by now that Hebrew and Yiddish is not the same. Hebrew with vowels is not Yiddish. Yiddish is a mixture of German, Russian, and other European languages, and though written in Hebrew characters, it should not be confused with Hebrew itself. All right? Next slide. Hebrew verse Yiddish. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim wa et haaretz. That's on the left-hand side. What is this on the right-hand side? Let's go into the next part. The matter of sounds. A vowel is defined as a speech sound that is produced by comparatively open configuration of the vocal tract with vibration of the vocal cords, or a letter representing a vowel sound. So, a vowel, brothers and sisters, a speech sound that is produced by comparatively open configuration of the vocal tract. We already know that Israel is a wise and understanding people, says Deuteronomy, right? When Israel's keeping the laws. A wise and understanding people have structure to their language. A wise and understanding people have structure to what a man can wear, what a woman can wear. Of people of order and structure, all right, organization of structure, have these kind of things, and for the lack of a better term, in place. Let's go on. The matter of sounds. The argument concerning Hebrew has no vowels is presented usually from them who are unilingual, meaning knowing only one language. Since English has a vowel system built into it, and Hebrew, as many other Shemitic languages, do not have a set vowel system built into it, we can see the teaching saying Hebrew has no vowels comes from the idea of those who don't understand another language. Hebrew has no vowels comes from the idea of those who don't understand another language, certainly an Eastern language. Next slide. Spoken language is older than written language. I want to emphasize that. Spoken language is older than written language. Thus, to try to understand a language by solely looking at what is written is frivolous. People speak before they write. So one is going to have to actually learn the language. You understand? Next slide. The matter of the word shalom. Now, let's look, brothers and sisters, at this, right? Jumped the gun, sorry. Peace. Peace in Yiddish, as you see the Google was made to look for, and how it said shalom, 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 shalom. Shalom and shalom are two different things. So I have to ask the people to stop saying that shalom must be Yiddish. Because even when you look up the Yiddish word for peace, the way they say to even pronounce is not familiar with us. This part we see here comes from the book of Numbers, chapter 6. Yisaya panav elecha vayasim lacha shalom. Next slide. The appendix. Peace. How is everybody? This writing here will be in reference to Hebrew. The first place where we see the word Hebrew is in Genesis 14:13, when Abram was called a Hebrew. The next time was in 9:14, where Joseph was called a Hebrew. In Exodus chapter 5, verse 3, we read that the Most High identified himself to the Egyptians through Moses as the God of the Hebrews. There are other references about Hebrews in the book, such as 1 Samuel 4, 1 Samuel 29, and Jonah chapter 1. The Israelites were in communication with other nations. This is in Ezekiel 27, the business between the Tyrians, the Greeks, and Israel. The point in this writing is to state that Hebrew had vowels. There are those who would state that Hebrew does not have vowels, however. The first thing to understand is that Hebrew is not a language, it is a people who descend from Abraham. Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees. He does spoke Chaldean. Abraham was from Ur of the Chaldees. He does spoke Chaldean. He came to a land of Canaan where when he was 75. So it is obvious he spoke before that age. Next slide. Continue. What is called Hebrew today is a branch from the Canaanite languages. This is why we see Hebrew listed in the Afro-Asiatic list of languages. According to Bernard Anderson in his book, Understanding the Old Testament, Hebrew did not have vowels, and vowels were added later. According to several references, such as communication, we see that vowels give sound. According to the Zonovan Pictorial Encyclopedia of the Bible, Hebrew is related to Arabic, Ethiopic, Syrian. To this day, those languages have vowels. The Assyrians as a people fell in 612 BCE, but their language can still be heard in others' documents. Yeah. Ancient Israel from the time of the settlement in the land spoke Hebrew, and at the same time had messages sent to other nations, and they spoke. The spies in the time of Joshua spoke to Rahab. The messengers of the king of Assyria spoke to the messengers of the king of Judah. Next slide. The fact that there was an interpreter between them, meaning between Joseph and his brothers, shows that language, shows that the language the sons of Israel spoke was known to other nations. Now, if we look at the fact that Aramaic and Arabic does not have written vowels in their language, does it mean that there are no vowels? I do not know Arabic, but I know people who do. Yeah. Some have stated that Hebrew had no letters in its original form of it. There we have a problem. First off, it was the ways of other nations such as Egypt and Sind, which is China, to have pictures representing a story. Next slide. See, when we are reading literature and other information, we cannot separate ourselves from life. Life teaches things, not book. No, I'm not saying don't study. I'm saying the simple believe every word. I have heard that say that Hebrew does not have vowels. The question comes to mind. The Hebrew word for women is Isha, and the word for fire is Ishe. The Hebrew letters there and those two words are the same, the Aleph, Shin, and the Hey. Now, the word woman and wife are synonymous in Hebrew. The word can be found in Genesis 2, verse 22, and the Genesis chapter 2:22, and the other parts as Isha. The word for fire offering is Ishe, and that can be found in Leviticus chapter 3, verse 3. So Ishe is spelled the same way as Isha. So if there were no vowels, how will you distinguish between a woman as an Isha and a fire offering as an Ishe? All right. Next slide. Conclusion part 4. When one says that Hebrew does not have vowels, what is being said then is the following. There is no masculine and feminine. The fact that the book is translated into English with the names of people still in Hebrew sounds with just English letters means nothing. Just as Jehoshaphat, Eliakim, etc. Those names were not English, though they were written in English letters. The issue with Shebolet and Sebolet is Judges. Chapter 12 means nothing since all ah and I sounds were in Hebrew. And that's what I attempted to show tonight, that there's more than just an ah and an I sound, all right? In the time of Nehemiah, when Judah came back from the captivity of Babylon, we see that he had to teach the people the language as recorded in Numbers chapter 13. If Israel spoke all ah, and I periodically as sounds, right? Are we to believe that what he had to teach, did the people forget the ah and the I sound? See, in the time of Nehemiah, you had the people reinstituting the Hebrew because many of the children spoke half Zidonian, half Israelite, spoke half Canaanite, spoke half Israelite, and so forth and so on. Next slide. Continued part 5. Am I saying that the Hebrew we speak today has not been influenced by others? No, I'm not saying that. It is evident by words such as mikwarer for refrigerator that there is an influence of modernization of the language of Hebrew. Now, it is interesting that parts of the Hebrew scriptures were written in Aramaic, such as in Ezra and Daniel. The third king to reign in Israel after the divided monarchy was Baasha. That is not a Hebrew name. The third king to reign in Israel after the divided monarchy was Baasha. All right. The second tribe in Israel, Simeon, is not a Hebrew name. The word Simeon, which is Shimon, is from the word Shama, which means to hear in Aramaic, not Hebrew. The Hebrew word for to hear is He-ezin, which is where the word Ozen comes from, which means ear. Next slide. The appendix, part 2. Aleph, Bet, Gemel, Dalet, Hey, Wow, Zion, Het, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Zadeh, Kuf, Reshin, Tau. That's the Hebrew ancient Israel would have been seeing and used to. But as we already went over, brothers and sisters, there were different writing forms of Hebrew as time went on. Giving honor and praise unto the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael. There will be a part 2 to this. All right? About the Hebrew that we speak is not Yiddish. Just because it may be written in Hebrew letters doesn't make it, brothers and sisters, a Hebrew word. For instance, if I were to sit there and say DAD, which is dad in English, but in Hebrew, Dalit and Dalit is Dad, which means love, right? There's no correct way to write a Hebrew word in English letters. So you have, for instance, Spanish, French, and English all share the same alphabet. Well, just because Hebrew and Yiddish have a similar writing form doesn't mean that it's the same language, because it's not. And anybody worth their grain of salt will let you know that words such as Shalom, such as Yisrael, are not Yiddish. Giving honor and praise unto the Creator. Shalom.